Hi, my name is Zack. Let me tell you a story. I was laying on the weird, cushioned table staring up at the sterile fluorescent lighting of the SUNY Brockport Student Union. It was my sophomore year of undergrad. I was between classes and the American Red Cross was holding a blood drive. I had routinely donated since high school, so I figured, why not? After filling out the pre-donation survey, I waited. And waited. Eventually, a nurse came in. "So, you're ineligible to donate," she said. "What? Why?" I asked. "Your answer to question 13, she replied. I took a look. "Oh, that question. For how long?" I asked. "You're actually," she paused, "blacklisted forever in our database." I left, found an unoccupied closet, and I cried. Blood donation policy is not what this podcast is about. But the long and short of it is that I was banned from donation because I was gay. Since the AIDS crisis of the 1980s, the Food and Drug Administration had put a functional ban on gay and bisexual cisgender men from donation. This was a dramatic step that may have had some justification early on in the epidemic, but it's since been deemed by many scientists and LGBTQ+ leaders as harmful and discriminatory. Instead of more comprehensive screening practices, like alterations to the pre-donation survey, this ban remained in place for decades, barring queer cis men from donating life-saving blood in what seems to be a never-ending campaign from blood collection organizations begging people to donate. If you're curious, I have some sources on this in the description. That semester, I was in Western New York. The next, I was in Washington, D.C. as part of the internship program, working for the leading gay rights organization, the Human Rights Campaign. I set up a meeting with my congressman about the issue. The next year, he was tweeting about it, when he literally did not know about the policy when I had spoke to him. A few years after that, the policy was modified so that queer men who had been banned for decades could donate once again. I gave blood in 2017 for the first time in years. Now, this is an aggressive abridgment and oversimplification of this policy and my story surrounding it. Do I take single-handed credit for the repeal of this backwards and homophobic policy from the FDA? Yes, I do. You're welcome, America. No, that's a joke. The change was a result of decades of work from queer activists, doctors, and scientists. But that is finally what leads me to my point. One college kid meeting with his congressman, and that congressman tweeting about it, did not lift the blood ban. But it was a snowflake or two in an avalanche that started before I was born. Systems, policy, social, and cultural change is the result of advocates and activists fighting tooth and nail for our laws to reflect our values. It is the feminist movements securing women the right to vote in the United States. It is the African American civil rights movement getting federal protection for people of color. And it is disability advocates finally getting the ADA and IDEA passed. It is groups of people working together, using a variety of tactics to, as Martin Luther King Jr. said, move the moral arc of the universe towards justice. Groups of advocates, families, and youth working together can do amazing things. I know, because in my 8 years of working at Families Together, I've seen what groups of peers are capable of. My name is Zack, and welcome to the Peercast. Okay, that was long-winded, but it was important, and I love the sound of my own voice, so. As you can guess, today we are talking about policy change, systems, and what we can all do to influence our government to better serve the youth and families of New York State. We have an entire department dedicated just to that, of which I used to be part. We will be talking to them in just a second, but first, we should get some basics and review out of the way. Cue the classic.
I'm just a bill, yes, I'm only a bill, and I'm sitting here on Capitol Hill. Well, it's a long, long journey to the capital city. It's a long, long wait while I'm sitting in committee, but I know I'll be a law someday. At least I hope and pray that I will, but today...
So, the U.S. operates under a federalist system, which is a fancy political science word that just means we have a federal government, which is for the entire country, and a state government, which regulates just that particular state. Families Together primarily works in the advocacy space of the state government of New York. It's in our name, after all. The legislative branch writes and drafts the laws and consists of the Assembly and the State Senate, which are made up of a bunch of different lawmakers elected all over the state. The judiciary branch consists of the courts, which interpret the laws, with the biggest one being the New York Court of Appeals. Some judges are elected, some are appointed. It depends on the court. The executive branch consists of the agencies that enforce the laws and deliver services, which, as of this writing and recording, is led by Governor Kathy Hochul. Governors are elected every 4 years. A big part of Families Together's mission is to influence these government branches to enact laws and policies that we believe will benefit families and young people in the state. That is the primary purview of the policy department, which works day in and day out to do just that. All right, I've been talking long enough. Let's let them explain what we are fighting for, how we are fighting for it, and what you, yes, you specifically, can do right now to make change. If y'all could introduce yourselves and what's your role here at Old Families Together in New York State?
Hi, everyone. I'm Brad Hansen, Policy Director at Families Together in New York State, and I liaison between our statewide network of parents and young people with policy, our legislative process, and coalitions.
I'm Khadija Abdulaziz. I'm the Youth Public Policy Coordinator for Families Together in New York State. My role is really about the intersection of lived experience, youth voice, and of course, state-level policy advocacy. I work to make sure that the perspective of young people and families who are directly impacted by New York's mental health, child welfare, juvenile justice, education, and disability systems are not just included, but centered in policy decisions and legislative processes.
Oh, is that all?
I think that's all.
What she said.
Khadija, how does it know that you replaced me now that I am old and decrepit?
I will say that I don't think there's such thing as replacing people. I think I bring my own perspective and experience, but there's no replacing you, Zack.
So there is such a thing as old and decrepit, is what I'm hearing.
See, I tried to gracefully ignore that part. I wouldn't call you decrepit, maybe a little old.
Yeah, okay, yeah, you know what? That stung more than it should, but that's a fair hit. It's not inaccurate. For anyone not in the know, I actually used to work in the policy department here at Families Together. Yeah, I was in the youth liaison role that Khadija is in now, and the clock struck 12 at midnight on my 31st birthday, and Brad entered my apartment and forced me to sign a resignation letter. No, that's not what, for the record, that's a joke. That's not what happened. But yeah, we all basically agreed it was good to get, an actual younger person in for the youth perspective. So, but yeah, these are all jokes. You've been excellent to have on the team, Khadija, and I'm very excited to have you here and talk to you. And Brad's also here.
I am also here. And old and decrepit.
That's true. You are slightly older and slightly more decrepit than me, though not by much. We're pretty, like just a hair. This almost feels silly to ask because I know the answer, kind of, especially for Khadijah's position and largely for Brad's position. But what does your usual day on average look like here at Families Together?
You want to take it, Brad, or should I start off?
No, I feel like I want to hear your answer.
I feel like it really depends. I think it depends on the season and the day. It can always be different, but typically I'm usually moving between a mix of policy research, coalition work, which is mostly meetings and conversations, or youth engagement and legislative strategy. So it's a little bit of everything. Right now, things are very busy. This week is going to be very busy, and this season is very busy. So there's going to be a lot of in-person meetings, as well as I will be giving testimony at a legislative hearing. So I'd say it's different day to day, but a big part of my job and the most important part to me is empowering families and young people so that they can advocate for themselves. So another part of that is I'm usually meeting with young people, helping them develop their storytelling skills, answering any questions they might have, that type of work.
Khadijah forgot to mention she's going to be speaking at a press conference too. And then we have two rallies this week and advocacy days. Like Khadijah said, it's different every week. It's different every day. The overarching theme is that we are trying to move the needle and help move things in a positive direction for young people and for parents. And there's so many different, day-to-day tasks that are connected to that. We work in deep collaboration with different coalitions and stakeholders and social movements across the state. We do our best to find parents and young people in our network and connect them, get them involved in the work that we're doing. And they're always trying to get their sense of what's happening in the system and give them opportunities to shape the change, talking to families to better understand their story and what happened to them, and sort of invite them to share their vision for what they'd like to see differently. And so that's some of the stuff we do. We want policymakers to intimately understand and have empathy for people that are going through these systems, and learn from their experiences to make it better. They can't make the system better if they don't understand what it's like to go through it. And that's something that our network is built to deliver.
Nothing about us without us. I want to start a little broad and then narrow it down a little bit more. I know you guys talked about some of the stuff you're currently working on as part of your day-to-day. I talk a lot about the big six when I'm talking on our TikTok page and this podcast. So that's mental health, addiction, developmental disabilities, education, juvenile justice, child welfare. I mean, I joked, Khadijah, when you said it earlier. It was like, oh, is that all? But like, yeah, that is a big list. So if you had to talk to someone who had never heard of us or our work before, what would you say are some of the overarching kind of big tent goals within those spheres of our organization? You said something earlier about moving the needle in a positive direction. What does it look like when that needle is pointing in the positive direction?
At our core, Families Together really believes that families and young people should have access to timely, community-based, culturally responsive support. And that's before systems reach a crisis point, not after. So really what we advocate for are policies that are informed by lived experience. And from what I gather, that means strong investments in behavioral health, youth and family peer support, community schools, alternatives to suspensions, and systems that really keep families together whenever safely possible. I'd say that's like my broad understanding of our policy stances, but I'm sure Brad might want to add to that or extend on it a little more.
Are you accusing me of being long-winded?
No, maybe.
No, I think Khadijah's answer is really concise. We believe in the power of keeping families together and supporting them in their journey. We believe that they should be at the center of decisions about what's best for them and their unique circumstances and the culture and the community that they're coming up in. And we want to surround them with support. And where there are barriers to reaching their full potential as a family, we want to get rid of them. Where they need more support, we want to put those supports in place. Where they themselves need more skills or more information to make informed decisions about what's best for them and their family, we want to provide those to them. I think it's fundamentally a belief that parents and families, young people, we are not the problem, we are the solution. And we should build a system that recognizes that no matter what dimension we're looking at it from: child welfare, juvenile justice, mental health. Families know what it's going to take. They have it within them to meet these challenges, overcome them with the right amount of support. And so that's the kind of system we want to build for them.
So I think what would be good is, I'm sure you guys will get all excited when we talk about get in the weeds of what you're working on currently, like bills wise and movement wise. Before we do that, I think it would be good to maybe look a little bit at the recent past. So what would you say are some of the major victories of the policy department, either legislatively or otherwise, in the, I guess, just Families Together in general, and the recent past in particular?
What my time here has been like, looking back even before when I started, one of the major victories that Families Together was a driving force in was the Timothy's Law campaign, which was a state level effort to advance what we call mental health, addiction, and behavioral and physical health parity, which is to say that under the law, under insurance coverage, insurers have to treat mental health and addiction the same as they would behavioral or physical health. There is actually no real difference between those things, and the law would recognize that. And this was due to a family member who lost their child because they were denied mental health visits. So they lost him to suicide completion, right? That's that story, right? And so someone who lived through that was this child was the namesake of that piece of legislation and that movement. And New York State successfully, after much effort and struggle, passed the Timothy's Law campaign, which was at the time one of the strongest parity laws on the books anywhere in the country. So that was a major victory, and that was decades ago.
It's just so it's always just terrible when something has to come to a tragedy in order to get systemic change. Unfortunately, we've seen a lot of examples of that, and that's just one of them. But also, mental health parity feels like one of those things that, if you ask the average person, it would almost be like, that's not already a thing. Like, why don't we already have that? It feels so inherently obvious, like, to us now, like that it just kind of like mind boggling that that's not only not the default, that we had to fight tooth and nail to get it to be so.
Yeah. That's a history of, I think, social movements in this country. There's so many things that now I think we take for granted. Something's rights and programs, we feel like, they've always been around, it's always been true. And then as those things are eroded or folks are in power, trying to take them away or questioning, wait, can they do that? And it's like, yeah, they can do that because these things didn't exist decades ago when people fought for them. It's good to look back at that history because we need to fight not only to keep the things that the people that came before us won, but we need to, in fact, do better and make an even better and more positive future, because we know that no matter how far we come, there's always more to go. There's more we can do to make sure that mental health, for instance, is the norm, and that there's no question if someone needed to get mental health care or they're struggling with their emotions or didn't want to live anymore, that they could get support. That's the whole point. That's what we're fighting for. And it's not something that we get to be bystanders for. That's what this network's all about. We have to fight for these things. There's a lot of fighters in New York State and in this network, and we're going to do whatever we can together to go even further. We're not going backwards.
Well, and also just another thought I had too while you were talking, like, to put it diplomatically, the insurance industry has extremely powerful like arms at their disposal, whether you're talking about lobbyists or just influence in general. I don't want to get too in the weeds there, but I just want to acknowledge how much of an uphill battle that is, and kind of like the power of the opposition in that regard, especially, is not to be taken lightly. So the fact that we managed to win that victory it's saying a lot.
Yeah. They call those kind of things special interests. If you can believe it, why a thing is the way it is often because it's in someone's interest to keep it that way. Wasn't in their interest as insurance companies, as for-profit businesses, to offer more extensive mental health supports, because that would mean that they'd have to spend more of the premiums that they collect to pay out for mental health benefits. And so I don't try to like paint this as like necessarily like cynical or evil interest, but it's in their interest as an entity. And so just as it's in our interest as families and as young people to get those things, whereas they're, organized business lobbies who can spend money donating to political campaigns, and they obviously carry a lot of influence because of the nature of insurance companies and shaping the system. We have to counteract that. And again, coming back to like people's movements in this country, the only thing that we can do if we don't have money is people power. And that's a big part of how we accomplish the things that we have so far. Why Medicaid covers family and youth peer support. Why you're supposed to have parity between insurance, health, mental health and physical health. And so many of the things that we fight for and try to make better, those things happen because people threw down, right? They fought for these things, and
is that a political science term? Throwing down?
Absolutely. It's in textbooks everywhere. At least the ones I read. Just kidding. Well, I was talking about stuff we did before I showed up. And then in my time, one of the first big issues that we cut our teeth on was raising the age of criminal responsibility. Before 2018, when the bill was passed, young people could be automatically tried as adults in the criminal justice system at 16 or over, 16 and above. And that meant that they would be prosecuted in adult courts. They could be sent to adult jails and prisons. And we knew that that was not the right place for them to go. That wasn't the right system for them. That there is actually a family court system that's more designed and developmentally appropriate for young people. And so we fought in a bitter struggle to advance that bill for 5 years before we were actually able to get it passed. Now, 16 and 17-year-olds are not, for the most part, not tried as adults. They're not going to, certainly not going to adult jails and prisons. And there have been forces from district attorneys to police, some judges trying to roll these things back to a darker time, to a less just time, and we're not going to let them. And so we have the Protect Raise the Age bill, or a coalition, which is fighting for, of course, protecting Raise the Age and that victory, but also trying to advance it and put more money and more resources into the communities hardest hit, most impacted by, young people and poverty. And so that's what we're up to right now. Fast forward. But New York was one of the last states in the country to make that change.
It goes into what you were saying before earlier in the conversation. A lot of our work is just making sure we got the boulder up the mountain, and now some people are trying to push it down back down the mountain. Sisyphus is all like, no, I just got it up here. It's unfortunate we have to spend so much time and energy sometimes, but yeah, a lot of it is not just We got to not let things regress. As you were saying.
And I also think that another issue that surrounds Raise the Age is that it's really a youth policy at its core. And I think sometimes youth policies don't have enough youth voices involved in the work behind the scenes and the work up front in terms of media and the rhetoric that's pushed. How often do we hear from youth in big media who have actually been incarcerated or lived through that experience? Not very often. So I'd say that when we talk about Raise the Age and a lot of these other major issues that come up, trying to keep Raise the Age and trying to progress it, we should also talk about youth voice and the work that we do in speaking to young people who are impacted by this and young people who have stories. And then not only us speaking to them, but us giving them a seat at the table and making sure that other people have access to them and are able to hear directly from them.
Kind of almost the mission statement of this podcast and a lot of my other work at Families Together, and a lot of the stuff you guys too, like that you guys do too. Obviously, it's a lot working with lawmakers, setting up rallies, but at the end of the day, those lawmakers are beholden, at least in theory, to their constituents, and they're going to vote based on their beliefs and the information that they have available to them. So I think a large part of, honestly, both of our jobs and just our mission here at Families Together is making sure that the public has the accurate, truth information. And in a lot of ways, we're fighting upstream from, well, and quite frankly, sometimes it just reaches the range of propaganda, which is, again, a lot of these are real tough uphill battles, but
like a challenge for youth advocates is that many of them, especially our most youngest, they can't vote. Right? They're not yet able to exercise that right. I introduced the idea of sort of solidarity with young people, this idea that adult allies, parents, policymakers, everyone should go out of their way to listen and understand what their experiences are. And if they did, they probably wouldn't be so supportive of these things are so demonstratively harmful and center punishment and throwing young people away who have so much potential, and things to offer us. We all lose when we don't believe in our young people because they have so much immense talent and ability and things to offer our society. And I think that's a big part of what we're doing at this organization, whether it's Raise the Age or mental health, is we want to unlock their potential and invest in them. And it's not simply an altruistic thing. It's in all of our interest to do that.
What are some of the major bills, initiative movements that we're trying to get passed right now, recording this in February of 2026?
Yeah, I can start us off. I'd say right now we have quite a few priorities. They include expanding access to youth mental health services, of course, strengthening peer support, and we work a lot on advancing alternatives to school exclusion through solutions, not suspensions, which is one that I particularly enjoy working on. In layman's terms, solutions, not suspensions is right there in the title. We are pushing to no longer use suspensions as the first act of discipline throughout public schools in New York State. There's so much research and ample support to show that suspensions do not positively impact students who are struggling in schools, and oftentimes they deter students from succeeding in school. So really what we're advocating for is that we are offering solutions to these students who may be struggling or may need extra support, or oftentimes students might not even be struggling, but suspensions are handed out like candy and used when they're not necessary.
That's 100% right. And specifically, it would be prohibiting suspensions pre-K through third grade in most cases, except for more serious violations, insubordinance or willful defiance or tardiness even, which are very subjective offenses, and they invite people with power, like teachers, administrators, to act on implicit bias. And that's where you get a lot of those numbers that Khadijah was talking about earlier. And then also the length of suspension. You can suspend someone in New York State for up to 180 days, which is almost the entire school year. the bill would limit that to 20 days. And there's a few other things in there, but those are like the big three pieces that get at the goal that Khadijah talked about.
Before I came to Families Together, I actually did data analysis for a school district in State College, Pennsylvania. And a lot of my work was getting deep into piles and piles of data from every single school in their district, from elementary school all the way through high school, and looking at those disparities. And even in a very small school district like State College, there were extreme disparities when it came to discipline, not only for students of color, but students who had IEPs, students who had special needs. It was actually so eye-opening for me just to see how disproportionate it was. I know we all hear this all the time, that there's disproportionality in education and in so many of the areas that we work in, but I think data really showcases it in a way that is so clear and so hard to deny. So that's something that we're working on with Solutions Not Suspensions.
We want to carve mental health and addiction services out of Medicaid managed care. Now, I could stop there, but you might not everyone will understand what that means. So like Medicaid managed care is something that came about in 2018. It is essentially a structure where mostly for-profit insurance companies manage Medicaid on behalf of the state. They generate profits doing this. In the mental health and addiction side, that's $400 million a year guaranteed just in profits to manage Medicaid mental health benefits. And what we found is that they do a lot of the same things that they do in the private insurance side when it comes to mental health. We talked about parity not so long ago. These are almost, in many cases, one for one, the same entities, except now they're managing our public health system via Medicaid, but doing a lot of the same things. Now Medicaid recipients have to deal with ghost networks, trying to find out whether a provider is in their network or not, which the Attorney General had done an investigation on. And some networks, like the calls lists of providers they give out are like 85% not in network or accepting clients. They're dealing with claim denials, which is extremely frustrating. Once you've even got to the point where you're receiving services, the providers go to bill and then they can't. And so that really affects the family and the young person, and then delaying payments to providers too. All these things help contribute to wait lists, to provider shortages, to the lack of providers out there, which means for families and for young people, access to high quality and timely care is next to impossible.
You know what really helps someone in a mental health crisis or just dealing with mental health issues in general? Unending bureaucracy. I find that calms me right down.
Yeah, me too. And they all just kind of say no or get voicemail. It's just all very soothing. The thrust of the bill, it would save money, the state money that they could use to reinvest into the services that we think are deeply underinvested in. But it is fundamentally, a red tape issue. It is in the interest of the young person to get care. It's in the interest of the provider to provide it. It's in the interest of the parent to find it for their child. But is it in the interest of the managed care organization to pay for it? Right? That's, I think, the logic that's sort of twisting Medicaid the way that it is. And we just think that should end. It should return back to a state managed system, a public health system. The denials and delayment of payments were much, much less before the state made this shift. The state was obligated via statute to move what we used to call cost of living adjustments for human service agencies. So anyone providing services, any agency providing services, inflation is a real force in our world and our society. And when the cost of something goes up, that the state pays these providers would go up with it. But they didn't. Routinely for 2 decades, up until very recently, would deny the rate increases, the COLAs to the agencies, and would declare that a savings, that they saved the state money. Now, over 20 years, hundreds of millions of dollars have essentially been siphoned away because of this recurring process. And so when providers say we can't afford to pay people better, we can't afford to keep the lights on, the cost of everything is going up, we can barely keep our doors open, and families are struggling to get care in a timely way, in a quality way, where people aren't dealing with turnover, which is a really devastating thing. We hear from young people, they start a relationship with a healing professional, someone, a peer advocate. People don't stay in those jobs because they're paid so little. They're stressful positions, afford to pay them any better. And so they're going to look for employment elsewhere, either within the field, but very often outside the field. They're leaving the mental health system. They're not working in it anymore. And that is a bad situation for families. It's a bad situation for young people. It's a bad situation for anyone who is invested in making sure that they get this care. All that comes back in a lot of ways to the denial of COLAs for so long. But for the past 3 years, and now we're looking at maybe a fourth, they're going to get COLAs. Now they're calling them targeted inflationary increases. So I say the art is formerly known as COLA, but now TII. And it looks like we're getting them. The problem, and this is where our advocacy is going to be really important, and actually Khadijah's speaking to this week at a press conference, is that the government has a tendency of giving not enough. If inflation for the past year was 2.7, they say 1.7, and that essentially is a cut because it's not keeping pace with inflation. And I know sounds like it's a lot about money and providers, but ultimately this has a big impact on families and young people when they're not able to get the care they need.
I'm a young person myself, and growing up, all of these barriers were in place, and now I'm 24, and it's still the same issues that were in place when I was 14 and severely depressed and had no idea where to go, because unless you had very good insurance and also access to money, there weren't very many options.
So let's say someone has been listening to us talk so far and they are now all educated, they're all caught up, they're really jazzed about what we're doing. What is something that someone listening to this podcast can do right now to get involved to maybe help make some of these changes happen?
I'd say right now you can reach out to me if you want to get involved, if you have a story to share. But also very soon, we have Family Empowerment Day coming up. Family Empowerment Day is really when we bring the families, youth, advocates, and people in our network all together in one space to not only share their stories, but also build power. And we really want to push for change collectively as a community. It's a day where we get to remind lawmakers that the people most affected by these policies are paying attention. And not only are they paying attention and here, but they're also organized and they're working together. So I'd say if that sounds really interesting to you and like something you want to be involved in, you can just Google our website and everything should pop up. You can Google Families Together in New York State Fed and it should pop up. You should be able to register. And not only can you register, but you can also get on a free bus from multiple regions across New York State to join us on the day of Family Empowerment Day. And we want as many people as possible here on the ground. But also, if you can't physically be present, we always try to create opportunities for people to share their experience, their lived experience, their stories, whether it be from the standpoint of somebody who works with families and youth or families and youth themselves. And that can be done through Zoom or writing a letter, or even if you had somebody that you would feel comfortable them sharing your story on your behalf. There are so many ways to really speak up and advocate. And what we do is we try to create the opportunity that is best for you. So I'd say getting in touch with us.
We are literally going to where all of the lawmakers in Albany work. We are arriving at their front door, so to speak. Sometimes literally when we do our chants and rallies and stuff, they cannot help but hear us. So it's in a world where a lot of this advocacy is done like at least in my experience, just done online or sending letters or doing phone calls, which is all critically important. It is also really fun to get together, share the energy, share the love, and share in the fight we're all fighting. So yeah, that's our collective shameless plug to just go sign up for Family Empowerment Day if you haven't already. Just do it. If you've gotten this far into the episode, I really don't think you need to be convinced that much. But just do it. Just do it. It's free. It's a free bus. If you haven't signed up for our newsletter, I know Brad usually will send action alerts a lot of the time. If you want to speak more to those, you can, but a lot of it involves like writing a letter to your specific representative about a bill we're working on, or perhaps making phone calls. A lot of this work gets done. So let's say you call State Senator John Smith and you say you're in support of this bill. What'll happen is one of their staffers will record that, and oftentimes they're recording the volume of the calls or the letters that they're getting in terms of like this bill. And the more noise you make in that regard, the more likely it is to get that particular lawmaker to support or move a certain way.
There's so much you can do locally in your own backyard, connecting with other families, connecting with other young people, meeting with your legislators in your own district is absolutely a possibility. And if you are like, I wouldn't even know the first thing about how to start doing something like that, that is exactly the kind of assistance that we offer to people who are starting off their journeys as advocates. And I mean journeys. Even becoming an advocate is a process. The legislative process, systems change process, whatever you're doing also is a process. It takes time. Developing yourself also takes time, and it can take even longer if you don't have support. Thankfully, there's an organization like ours that will help you talk through what you can do to make things happen in your community. But I think the biggest thing that everyone gets stuck on is that it might feel like it's too big and I'm too behind. I don't know enough, and all these other people know more than me, so they don't start. I would say the big thing is start.
Policy in general can be kind of a tough, slow-moving field at times. Oftentimes, it's very rewarding, but we've addressed like systemic change can be slow. What is a good way to combat like the hopelessness and cynicism that some are feeling in today's just overall political climate?
First of all, it is mostly justifiable. I think, especially for my generation, there's a lot of hopelessness because for most of us, it just feels like a never-ending battle. But I will say that for me, what makes me not only excited to do my work every day, but continues to motivate me is that there is work to be done. I think there's two ways to look at a problem. You can either look at it and be overwhelmed and just dust your hands off and decide to not try and change anything, or you can really see it as something that you can work to change on your own and with the people around you. And in policy, that's really what it's about. Like we've said so many times, these victories that we see maybe in a newsletter or on the news one day, or just all of a sudden in social media, aren't things that happened in 1 week or one day or overnight. Although it can look like that, there are things that many people were slowly working on for years and years and years. And it's usually a big change, but there's so much behind the scenes that goes into it. So every day that you participate in that fight, every day that you put work towards something, you're kind of, like we said, pushing the needle and helping reach that goal. So I think talking about past successes, looking at past victories, and also just looking at the things we have today that are supporting communities and are supporting youth and families is a good way to remind yourself of why the work is being done, and that there are times when it does lead to victory, maybe not right away, maybe not overnight, but eventually.
I am a huge fan of inspirational quotes. I know it's cheesy, and yes, if I knew where to get one, I'd have a poster of a cat on a thing saying like "hang in there." That's not what I would share though in this for this specific thing. There's a big quote that I come back to, I see all the time. That is action is the antidote to despair. Where I find myself, and if anyone's wondering how, how are you doing? How are you still doing this? It is that I feel what you feel deeply, deeply. Zach, you said it earlier, and we've had so many conversations about this, that everything feels so bad and insurmountable. And what could we possibly do to make things better? And the more I feel that feeling, the more I'm going to act, the more I'm going to do, the more I'm going to get involved and fight. That's what makes me feel like I can keep moving. And I think a second part of that is community, that we're so, I think, so quick to sort of see this as, through the lens of individualism, right? Like, what can I do? Like, and the reality is, I think we're kind of healing a broken world together. Like, ultimately, that's what we're trying to do. Bell Hooks says, rarely, if ever, are any of us healed in isolation. Healing is an act of communion, an act of community, right? And we do this together. So we're all feeling despair. That means we all have to act together. We're not alone. So that's where I've turned to in these times, and choosing deliberately to know my neighbors and to fight with them. If no matter what, like, at least I have them, and even if it's a losing battle, it's one we're going to fight anyway, because it's the right thing to do. A third quote, and these are all pinned in my Google. I'll spare you most of it, but just this one by Mary Oliver, and it is one part I love, is it is a serious thing just to be alive on this fresh morning in this broken world. And so, in a word, gratitude that I'm here, that I'm in this community, that I'm fighting with these people, raging against the darkness or whatever. We do it together. And if the birds can find a reason to sing every morning, we can too. So that's where I'm at. That's I think some of the ideas and the strategies I've used to keep fighting. And this network's great for that, because there's so many people that refuse to give up, and we're fighting for each other. And that's a beautiful thing.
Thank you so much, guys. I'm Zack, and this was the Peercast. Thanks for listening. If you are curious about anything we discussed in the episode and would like more information, feel free to reach out to me, Zack Kilmer, at ZKILMER at FTNYS.org. That's ZKILMER at FTNYS.org. We talked about Fed at length during the interview, but this is one more reminder to head to our website at FTNYS.org and sign up. We also have our annual conference coming up in May, so remember to sign up for that as well. Look forward to seeing you there. Families Together in New York State is a 501c3 nonprofit registered in the state of New York. Not all of the opinions shared on this program specifically or necessarily relate to that exact policy or general stance of FTNYS. For any questions about us or the work that we do, please email info@ftnys.org.